Hello and welcome to Sanguis Extremis. Hey Chris, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
All good here.
Our very first podcast, right?
Yes, that's a new start for us.
So, shortly before we introduce ourselves, let's quickly explain, can you explain why we are here? What's the purpose of our podcast?
Well, we discussed it for a long time, and we said we want to do a podcast in English, but we want to speak a lot about the German scene and to try to bring to an English-speaking audience things that are happening in Germany concerning Warhammer 40K initially, and also because in the end, the German tournament scene and Warhammer scene is quite obscure outside of Germany. Even within Germany, I would say a lot of people who may be interested but they don't speak German are kind of out of it. So with this, we hope to broaden the German scene a bit to a wider audience.
Yeah. So basically, as you listened, it's basically focused on competitive Warhammer 40,000. In the main aspect, we are living in Germany, we are covering mostly the German scene, but also in comparison to the rest of Europe, because we travel around quite a bit. So we also might be covering trips to UK, Denmark, or whatever, Spain maybe. So before we are introducing ourselves, a short outline. We are going to talk about several things today. First of all, the current meta and the meta in Germany, especially compared to the meta in other countries. The latest balance data slate, if you can call it like that. And in relation to that, of course, also about the meta watch article of Warhammer community and the current tournament status, meaning like what's about tournaments today. So, do you want me to start to introduce myself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if you get bored, just interrupt me. So I'm Juan. Basically, I'm half Spanish, half German. Grew up in Germany. Short story. My first contact with Warhammer 40,000 is basically, man, I have to go back a lot of years. I think you do, right? My first contact was 3rd edition. Do you remember that?
I think I was end of third, beginning of fourth when I had the first contact of Warhammer 40K. It was early 2000, 2001 for me.
Yeah, me way earlier. So I was still like maybe 15 years old. I don't even remember quite well. So I had my parents, I saw the miniatures at some friend's house. They were older than me. And I said, oh man, I want to do this. I didn't even know what tabletop going to be about. And they gave me a present. I think it was 15 years or 14 years maybe. And it was just on the release on the 3rd edition. It was like a starter box with the Black Templars as the poster boys. And which is up to date, my favorite army. And they were fighting against Dark Elder, and you had like a small plastic terrain in there, like ugly trees and even a ruin, and all you need basic for a very basic Warhammer 40,000 game. And so I lived in a small town, and we had like a friend of mine also had no idea. We liked the miniatures. We were blown away by the artworks in the rule book, and we loved the setting, and we just started painting. And I think the very first game, because it was like for us, we were used to Super Nintendo games and Nintendo games and maybe first computer games, and it was just an overload of rules in the book. So the first game we did was like, I think we did on imaginary rules, like we were, and even the second or third game we were trying to apply the original rule book, and I don't think we were knowing what we were going to do. And that was my first touch with Warhammer. What was yours?
There are 2 points, right? First touch was actually when I was young, quite young, like 12, 13. You remember the game Space Crusade?
Yeah.
My parents bought that for me because I really loved science fiction. I was reading a lot of science fiction, and they bought for me. I didn't know that it was Warhammer 40K. I learned that, I would say, way afterwards. But I remember seeing those Space Marine models, and I was like, whoa, and the Dreadnought. I think they had a small Dreadnought or something inside, and some Tyranids that you had to kill was a kind of a Space Hulk thing. And I think that was the first, and I always remember that. And then, but I played like a board game. It was kind of a board game, right? But my actual first conscious contact with Warhammer 40K was when I went to Athens in Greece to study. Where basically where I was living, like one block away was a fantasy shop, it was called, and it was basically all Warhammer miniature gaming. They had War Machine, they had Warhammer, they had Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And along that time also came out, you remember the game Dawn of War?
Yes, of course.
Yes, and so in combination with that, I found also the Horse Rising book. I started to read that, and all that got me to the hobby when I was a student in Greece.
Yeah, but of course, there's no way back once you lay hands on Dawn of War and Horus Rising, and it's like, okay, you are in. No way back.
By the way, I think I should tell everyone that I'm Greek originally. I grew up in Greece, in a small town, so Warhammer was not even remotely close to anyone knowing what that was. So my first contact when I went to Athens to study. And to be honest, that lasted 2 or 3 years, mainly through Warhammer Dawn of War while I was a student, through books, through playing a bit of like my first miniatures, painting them, horribly painting them.
Oh my god, I remember my miniatures. It was terrible. I still have them.
I don't. I had to give them away, or half of them, the other half sell them, because after I finished studies, I started working, and that took me out of the hobby. And I got back to the hobby last 5 years when I moved to Hamburg, actually.
Oh, nice. For me, it was actually a long journey. I mean, I started in the small town, right? When 15, we had no idea what we were doing. We liked the miniatures. We painted them like shit. Like, I don't even know how much thin your paints is not even helpful on that. It was like just terrible looking miniatures, but we had fun. But I actually moved away from the small city, and then I lost contact. So I focused on what I was doing anyway. So I played StarCraft Brood War.
Oh my god, yes.
And I started playing it on LAN parties. And suddenly, so I put away all my Warhammer miniatures because I moved to a new city. I moved to Hamburg in Germany, which is the second biggest city of Germany. And I had no, when you're like 15 years old, I wasn't into computer games anyway, and I didn't have the touch with Warhammer. Like I didn't have the link to Horus Rising or the Dawn of War was not even out then, I think. And so I lost completely contact with Warhammer, right? Because it was just my buddy and I who played it basically. So I put them in the basement and stuff. So I started playing, like, excessively playing StarCraft Brood War. Like, first of all, like beer and bretzel, normal casual gaming, but then it went. Actually, we became very competitive in it, and we had a lot of nicknames, a lot of teams, and I even played with some people who would later be known as Warhammer 40K people as well. So coming to that in a second. But anyway, I played StarCraft Brood War to a level where I played like for World Cyber Games tickets, Spanish national team, even won one part in the Spanish and the German national team for a short time. And we played in like my another friend of me and I played in every possible league there would be. So it was really my first contact with doing something competitively. So it was not even about having fun. It was more like, okay, we have to train this, we have to train that. And it was really, we were in one of the first sponsored esports teams, and they gave us hardware and stuff to play. It was like really like before even YouTube and before having streams or stuff like that. It was really like pioneering. And a lot of the people, like for example, In Control, I remember the WTC team of USA had like In Control Remembrance because he died, and he was like a famous StarCraft 2 broadcaster, streamer, and even commentator, I think. But in StarCraft Brood War, he was actually a pretty good player and also in the national team of the USA, and I played with him. So later on, when I played 40K, it was like, oh, we had something that more in common, and it was pretty, rough.
Yeah.
But after that, I actually it was like 2004, I think. I tried. So I was really used to playing competitive computer games on a very high level, possibly outside of Korea on the highest possible level. And I came back and said, okay, I was frustrated because I lost a very important tournament for, you remember World Cyber Games?
I think I heard it at that moment of time was very difficult. I remember reading it in computer game magazine in Greece or somewhere.
Yeah, it was like World Championship for computer games. So and StarCraft was really important. Then I lost the national finals for one place to get a ticket to, I think it was 2004 San Francisco. So I stopped because I was angry and salty. I stopped playing Warhammer, and I said, okay, I'm going back to tabletop. And then I started tabletop. I won my first two tournaments. No, I won my first tournament, and the second tournament I won third. And then I drove more outside of my city in my comfort zone, and then I just was losing. I got horribly stomped. And it was for me like I wasn't used to get stomped like in competitive environments. And then I stopped playing Warhammer until my study in Vancouver. And then I completely took off because my girlfriend was in Germany and my family as well. And I was over in North America, so in Vancouver. And I took my Black Templars and my Necrons with me. I think it was 5th or 6th edition. And they were actually good back then. In 5th edition, it should be. And all I had to do in Vancouver was studying, painting, building, buying, playing, and I got completely took off. And there was like, we drove to everywhere: Vancouver Island, Seattle, Whistler, Vancouver itself, Vancouver surroundings. There was like in Germany, tournaments back then were like on a very dirty, mad, shitty terrain, and maybe one day tournaments like what we call nowadays RTTs were the standard, right?
Yeah.
And basically in Vancouver, it was like, okay, you had this gaming areas where people would meet to play. That was not existent in Germany at that point. And there were a tournament, like every 2 weeks there was a tournament, and there were several 2-day tournaments, which was non-existent in Germany at that time. And I was just completely 3 years off the grid and just playing tournaments all the day. And that was my active area.
So you had terrain. I used to play with in my kitchen table, home table, with books as ruins and beer cans and all that as. I was doing Pullhammer. Terrain was a very at that moment of time for me. From 2000 to 2004, terrain was a very weird notion for me to build up terrain and how to build it. And I remember I was looking at some terrains I had in the shop where I was going often, and I was like, "Whoa, that's amazing!"
But super expensive. It was not. It was not affordable back then. Like 2004 was when I stopped with Brood War, StarCraft, and then I had you get girlfriend and stuff, and then I went to study like in 2009, so I had a 5-year break. But in 2005, I agree, we also played on books and beer cans. It was like not affordable for I don't know what 20-year-old guy, just not affordable.
Me, when I had started, the most impression was like I went on a Sunday because some of the shops were open on Sundays to where they had like kind of RTTs, kind of let's meet together and play games, kind of a combination between the two because the scene in Greece was not big enough, like it was very small at that moment of time. It's still, I would say, very small in Greece, although now there are a lot more organized guilds and wargaming clubs compared to that moment of time. And I remember I saw the Black Templar army. Remember the rules? Is it 4th edition where basically you killed one and they move forward? Something like that?
Yes,
remember?
Yes.
And they have the double chain swords or the double swords, the Crusader squads, right?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that against a Necron. By the way, both of your armies, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember looking at the Necron and saying, "Oh, those are Terminators."
Yeah.
But for me, I started with some small Space Marines, but then I moved immediately to Cow Space Marines, mainly because I wanted to summon a Bloodthirster like the Dawn of War game.
Yeah, and actually,
that was my goal.
That's also a point where we come through later at the end of the presentation of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because I'm more like you're. If we talk about Sanguis Extremis, you're possibly Khan in the pit, and I'm like Sigismund.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
so we
more
are
like
Black Templar and World Eaters, like
yeah,
Imperium and Chaos. So we will have this kind of conversations when we discuss competitive
or
40k.
or to be honest, after I read the latest book, Nasir Amit from the Flesh Terrace, that dog actually could be me also. I love that character now. Like, it's one of my favorite characters. I was like, damn, I want the Flesh Terror armies now.
Yeah, it's like that. No, but that's what we're trying to also with Sanguis Extremis as a format. We try to not only talk about competitive 40k, but also have like two sides of opinions and a vivid discussion about it. That's also
Yeah.
part of our concept. And yeah, I will quickly finish. So after I said after StarCraft being horribly competitive but much fun, I'm getting very nostalgic here. It was a really great time, and I met a lot of friends which I met in real life later on. And then I took 5 years break. Then I moved to Canada, and I took my up to now it's my most active competitive time in 40k, and possibly the most successful as well. After I came back from Canada, I completely stopped 40k because I started to create my own business. So I studied production for film and television, which is still the area I'm working in. But I founded a company, and I had to time for family and stuff like that because I was away for study, right? And I tried to play 40k, but I had like no, before I moved to Canada, I had like no hobby relation in Hamburg, in
Yeah.
Germany. So I restarted the hobby when I moved there because I was like, okay, I take my armies because I have no friends anyway yet. So, and that's a good start for me to find friends there. So when I came back, I tried to establish myself playing competitive 40k in Germany. But it was like, I didn't have the time you need to invest to play competitively. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Because
I
I
know
was
what you mean.
starting a business and I was my first tournament, and I realized, okay, I really have to. It's like a very time investing hobby if you play. It's time investing anyway, but if you want to play successfully competitive, you really have to be on the ball. You read all the new releases, which were the release waves were very slow back then, but still you need to buy, you need to paint, you need to be on track, and you need to play a lot. And I had like no time. I did like one game in a month, and there's no point then going to compete with others, especially not if you're driven for winning competitions or at least going to compete for the upper places, right? So I completely stopped 40k because I was like, okay, if I cannot play it 100% like how I want to, I stop. And I actually went back into end of 7th edition. I played one single game and said like, okay, I'm not going to take 7 books to play one game. And I came back in 8th edition, which was a complete reset. And then I started the YouTube channel. And no, here we are. I'm still playing competitively, but I don't visit tournaments so often as I would like to. But if I have the time and the choice, I would always put my channel first and tournaments second. So work limits me a lot, but I don't need to win competitions or even be in some top ranks of some ladder or whatever. For me, it's actually enough to be able to compete with the best players. I don't need to win or be in the top 10 all the time of some ladder. It's just for me enough if my skill level is there when I take notice, I can compete with these people who are up there. That's fine for me. What about you?
Yeah, for me it was more like when I moved to Hamburg. First of all, good disposal income. Also, a way to I was basically a lot in video games before moving Hamburg. I was playing a lot of World of Warcraft. I'm still sometimes going there. A lot of RTS games, StarCraft 2, and everything. But as I moved to Hamburg, I was working more and more with computers, and my job is about automation and so on. I just wanted to unwind and relax out of do something analog. And I was passing one day through the Warhammer shop here in Hamburg, and I said, "No, that's a thing I haven't seen in a while." So
here we go again.
and then I went in. I went in the first time. I went in the second time. The third time I bought some, and that's how I came back to the hobby. Plus, it was I think begin 1 year after it, more or less. something like that, beginning of 8th, and the Primaris, new Space Marines came out,
Oh,
and I love
Jesus.
those were beautiful. They're, like, you see them, you remember your old models, and then you see them and you say, "Whoa, these are completely amazing compared to the old ones," right?
Yeah.
So I started the Salamander Force because I love salamanders from the books that I have been reading, like Vulcan also in the Horse Case is one of my favorite Primarchs. So I started Salamander Force.
Nice.
And I started meeting some people around. Competitive, I start going to tournaments mainly because I want to see how well I can do. And also it's a way to get, I would say, a weekend relaxation outside of work to shut down your brain completely.
Yeah.
I never expect to, I'm happy if I'm a bit above average. Like if I do 3-2 for once, I'm really happy. If I do 5-0 in a 5-day tournament, I will be like, wow, amazing. I always try to do my best, and but my main purpose is not to do well in tournaments. It's mostly to, like, I'm not. I tried, like, in the beginning, I was saying, "Oh, this isn't good army. Let me try to meta chase," and then I said, "No." Like that, I had that thought for 5 minutes, but then I said, "No. I will play the armies I want to play. When they are good, I will do better. When they are bad, I will try not to be that bad." And that's how I am right now.
I think that's a really important point, but if you see it like that, is, I mean, for me, it is like that as well. As I said before, some people are really chasing to be, like, we have a letter in Germany for the German finals, but in order, like, I took notice, like, if I, especially for the channel, right, I try to switch a lot of armies so that people can see different battle reports and stuff like this. But if you want to really compete on a competitive level, and I would say we have a very high level in Germany of a very high skill level and player level in Germany. And I find myself having a very high, let's say, standard of wanting, like, if I play a tournament, I want to finish, like, I don't need to win, but I want to compete with the best, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. You want to be able to say I did my best and I faced
can
some
keep
strong
up.
opponents. Yeah, you can keep up. Yeah.
So especially, I'm not the guy. I have a lot of armies, but I'm not the guy who's, okay, Eldari are top notch. I'm gonna take Eldari, max them
No.
out, and play them. I don't copy list. I play my own list, and I do that. In my opinion, might sound arrogant, but I do that quite successfully. For the few tournaments I go on, I always get a very good cut, in my opinion. For example, last time I took, like, even Black Templars on Nephilim. You can go on an RTT. You can go 3-0 if you want to. But it's not about winning. Then it's more about being able to compete. And playing competitive doesn't mean you have to play the best army in the game. It just means to get the most out of the army you play, or the mode. Even you can break it even down to playing competitively can also mean you have a certain amount of miniatures, a certain miniature range, and even if it's not a best codex, even if it's not the best units, you can still play competitive. But that then means you possibly accept not to be first in the first top 10 out of 60, but you get the best out of the unit range and the codex you have. That's also playing competitive, in my opinion. And as long as you do that and you have fun, that's all good. And that's my approach. Like, I play Black Templars, or even if they are not good, I play them, or I play Necrons, even if they are not good. Of course, if Necrons and Black Templars are next to each other and Necrons are better, I slightly tend then to Necrons. But it's a personal. What I mean is, I don't need to meta chase to compete. It's more like the idea of getting the most out of what you have. That's my approach of gaming, and yeah, I think yours as well, right? That's what you.
For me, it has to do, like, I can say also the most enjoyable games are the games that end up very close, like that we have to go to round 5.
Yes.
If I steamroll my opponent and I know by turn 3 that I have won, or that my opponent has won by turn 3, actually that's reduces the enjoyment. So for me, it's like that the armies I play and everything gives me a chance to compete. And if I do well and I manage even to a strong opponent or a strong faction, I manage to get them to round 5 and be really close, that's really for me satisfying. I feel I did my best. And I just want to be able to play what I want and do my best. And if that means that, for example, right now some factions are quite strong, for example, and I do better than average, then I'm okay. If my faction is not as strong and I do worse than average, that's also okay. I just want to have fun at the end of the day, and that's my approach. And I think that I'm not in a position right now in my life to be able to chase meta and to chase being the top.
I think
but
at the
I
end of
want to
30,
be, I'm at the end of 30, and I want to be able to have fun and to basically disconnect from my work and my other life. It's kind of a form of escapism that I enjoy, and also that I enjoy. For me, it's important that I associate the faction I play with the lore, and I kind of like the fluff, like the
But
miniatures, and
but
all
you're
that.
still getting really good cuts at tournaments. Like
Yeah.
I have, for my example, for me, it's always important to win more than I lose. I don't care losing 3 times as long as I win 4 times. That's like a simple rule I get. And in the last 20 tournaments, I think I always managed to win more than I lost, except one. But that was not a good tournament in many ways. No, anyway, but in terms of player style, I would consider myself a very aggressive player. I like melee armies. I don't like. I mean, I played in the last GT. I played Necrons, and I ended up. I think I ended up 10th with 1 lose out of 5 games. But it would be a topic for another podcast. But for example, Necrons is currently a playstyle like pure game move, obsec, non-interactive with the enemy. Yes, you win. Yes, you score high, but that's not the way I like to play. Like in terms of player style, I'm really an aggressive player with who likes shenanigans, like playing Black Templars, Devu push here, a lot of action. I like that aggressive playstyle a lot and putting a lot of pressure on my opponent.
Yeah, I know what you mean with Necrons. You can win the games and you can still be bored playing them because you most probably your assets will die, but if they don't die by turn 3, you basically won the game. The opponent cannot do anything. You have like an 85 points scored already.
Yeah.
If you manage to survive until turn 3, and then your opponent has to play catch up.
Yeah, I have no pleasure in playing this at a tournament. I know it's successful. I know I will cut a lot better than other armies, and it's not my style. I don't like it, man. No, it's not about winning. Then it's like about having fun, and I'm not wasting my precious little time for.
Yeah.
Even if I win, I would have not fun winning, and that's the point where I say, okay, that's not worth it for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's why I sold my Necrons, because when I started playing them, I built up a Necrons. I like the models and everything, but when I started playing them and I had to play this obsec and everything, I was like, this is too boring for me. I like my units don't do anything. I just sit there and score points, and if my opponent can kill them, I lose. If my opponent cannot kill them, I win. It's not my style.
And yes, you can build a different list and go to a tournament. But that's not the point, because you want to get the most out of it. And we have currently, and that's another point we will come later on to, if the balancing forces you to play one specific loadout of your army because no other makes sense at all, and there is a dimension of gaps between it in terms of being successful with the concept, there's no point and no fun in it. Anyway, I think that's enough about us. That's enough about us. I said already we're talking about current meta in Germany, meta in other countries, and stuff like that. Let's start with the meta status. What do you think? The current meta. What's the general characteristic of the current meta? What's your opinion on that?
I can say 2 words. I think it's the most balanced I have seen through 8th edition now. Like there was maybe 1 or 2 months in 8th edition that I followed that was as close balanced as now. I think now is the most balanced have been for 2 editions now. But at the same time is kind of blunt because the meta is, I would say, so balanced right now that kind of there is no room for new lists and new innovations, right?
Yes.
You don't see, and you go to tournaments and you don't know who will win, but you know which lists are there, right? You know the top 20 lists that they will be there. You know which faction, what list they will bring. For example, it's been so long since I have seen an Adeptus Sororitas list that is not Bloody Rose with lots of Repentia, lots of Zephyrim, and just the same applies with, I would say, Necrons. The same applies with Harlequins. The same applies with Tyrannids,
Yes.
and so on. So I think it's very balanced, which is good for the game. You have variety of who is winning, that you can do well with lots of lists. But at the same time, the lists are kind of
No,
there's no
you can.
innovation
No,
right now.
you can do well with a lot of factions, but not with a
Yes.
lot of lists.
Yeah, that's actually more accurate. I would say out of all the factions, the more variety you see right now is Chaos Space Marines. You see a
Yes.
lot of Emperor's Children. You see Creations of Bile. You
But
see even Black Legion, but even then, all lists have the same units inside.
yeah, but still, there is a slight margin to it, and that's actually a point of our next not episode but next level
Yeah.
next chapter we will talk about. But as you say, yeah, we see Emperor's Children, and it's just one example, right?
No, but even if you see all the lists, they all have Abaddon. They
Yeah.
all have the 10-man blob of Terminators with the Black Rune of Damnation. The same.
But eventually, what I'm going to say is, you play Emperor's Children, actually, and I tried a lot with Creations of Bile. I had really good runs with Creation of Bile, and I'm currently playing Night Lords, which is amazing. But there's a but. Yes, you can play Night Lords. Yes, you can play Creations of Bile, and you played Word Bearers too. You can do all that, but there's a reason people go to a tournament with Emperor's Children, because with Night Lords, you basically cannot face, or barely can face, 1,000 Suns or Tyranids, because it's such a high mismatch. You almost go up with the opponent being 30 points ahead of you because of secondaries, because you cannot play two of your secondaries, because half your Legion trait does not work against those two armies. Same counts for Creations of Bile. Yes, you're amazing against melee armies, but once you get into heavy shooting, like a good Tau list, you go home. And that's not the point. If you go to a tournament living with, I can beat a lot of matchups really fairly better than anyone else, but I have two mismatches which I cannot win against an equal player. And then you are on the point where, okay, do I want to take that to a tournament? No, you don't, because you don't want to win. You don't want to go with a coin flip army.
I mean, you can see it also in the result, right? Creations of Bile do well, but they very rarely go to the 5-0 or 6-0, because they will face one of these lists. Even if they face Necrons, for example, they will lose because you don't have so much obsec, so suddenly you are back behind the primary. You may kill all the Necrons, but by the time you kill them, it's too late. They have already scored the 85, 90 points that you can never score. So there is hard matchups for Creations of Bile. That they are not there for so much for Emperor Children, because Emperor Children can deal with a lot of different situations right now.
Exactly, and that's a very good characteristic of this current meta. We have we have a very balanced game right now, to be honest. More balanced than I've ever experienced it. But at the same time, we have a very, you call it blunt, and I would sign that, actually. It's blunt. We have no in-codex balancing, but we have a very good balancing between the factions right now, except one or two escalators or people very down there. How, let's say, does the German meta differs from meta in other countries? I think I will make the first drop, which is terrain. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say the terrain is a bigger factor here than how the German meta is set up compared to, let's say, UK or US. That's one of the main things I would say. I agree with that.
For our listeners, what do we mean by the terrain is a big difference in the meta? I think terrain is like if you know WTC layouts, they're full of terrain, right?
Yes.
Germany, for example, this is a good comparison because I was in Spain last year and they have terrain, for example, ruins which are high enough and they're close, so you can actually put a knight, Magnus, or even flyers behind the obscuring, and they have true line, and you can actually hide stuff. In Germany, you have a lot of terrain, but it's very, on the same time, very. You cannot hide Magnus, Bellacore, or Knight.
Yes.
No point. You cannot.
That's one of the things I would say, and also the setups are very specific. I like all the rules pack I have seen in Germany. The terrain setups are very specific, so you can really build. There's always how you can build around the terrains, and that's why I would say in Germany you see more. You don't see outlier lists. You don't see anti-meta lists so much than you see, for example, in other countries.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. And that's also a point where right now it seems to be a good tone to have a battle pack before the lists go in, so people can actually prepare for the missions, which I don't like that. You know? I mean, I'm
in a different opinion on that, to be honest. I don't mind that, but I would like to see in Germany more what I have seen like in other countries, because last year I went to play in the LGT. I went to play in a tournament in Gibraltar and some other tournaments in the UK and also in Germany. And what they do, especially when I was in Gibraltar, for example, and when I, not in LGT, but in other tournaments in the UK, is that they basically take the terrain systems from different kind of metas and they make one tournament pack that uses all three. So you don't know if you will play in a WTC type of terrain. You don't know if you will play in a more, I would say what I saw in Gibraltar, that you had terrains that were more narrative style terrains, right? They didn't follow the L-shaped runes. They didn't follow, you need to have so many L-shaped runes and everything.
But they still follow the GW layout with the corridors and the plates below the terrain, or like
some tables follow that also. So what happened is you didn't know for which terrain you should build because you didn't know in which tables you will play.
That's okay.
What was happening was the lists were much more varied, and you could see some more weird lists doing well compared to like it wasn't as predictable who will win. For example, I saw a really nice Blood Angels list, who was all on foot with a lot of Blade Guards and a lot of Redemptors, for example, come forth, for example. That in terrains we have now here and in LGT would never come forth, right? Because it's a foot slogging army.
Of course.
Yeah. But in the terrain they were playing there, it actually held that list well. So what I would prefer to see is like take different terrain layouts from all over the world and apply them in one single pack.
Maybe that. Yeah. Here it's like that. You have 5 missions, like a normal GT, 5 games on 2 days. You have 5 missions, and for each mission you have 3 possible layouts. That's okay.
Yeah.
But the amount of terrain here is very heavy, and it's terrain which benefits melee armies a lot. And the fact that you cannot hide a Bellacore, that you cannot hide a knight. Of course, amplifies that shooting is good as well, but on the same time, the amount of ruins doesn't allow shoot armies really like to excel in that. I don't want to complain too much. It's just one point I don't like. Also, I don't know if it's Germany tends to be a bit later with list developments, and that's something I took from StarCraft. I was really, really annoyed because I was one I was very early, very competitive on that, and on some point in StarCraft there were no replays in the beginning. Okay, there were no VODs. VODs is basically like a first-person video capture of your game by pro gamers, for example. So there come a certain point where they bring out a patch, and certainly replays were a thing. People could save their games, upload them to Wikipedia or whatever. People would watch the replays and rebuild your orders. Okay, so they would copy your build orders and they would copy your playstyle. It's still a cheap copy of something someone else developed, and you will never be as good as the one who forged it, right? But it was in a way good because the skill level rose, like it exploded. You know, before it was like a couple of handful players which were a very high level, and suddenly everyone would play the same, like now, the same lists and excel in. It's not a skill explosion, it's more like a, you know what I mean? A lot of people
Yes.
tend to copy lists from the States here.
Yes.
But
Let me ask you something about this, right? Like, for me, the list development has to do also with what you are preparing, right? I mean, I think you have a more bigger touch with the German community than me. I follow more internationally and what's happening in Germany. But for example, do you think that I have seen it maybe also in Europe in general? Do you think we are very much oriented to WTC because we want to do well in WTC and how you
and we
select the
do.
team? Yeah,
Yes.
and we do, but then you don't have variety in the type of tournaments and the type of like, for example, if you take US, for example, right now they have the GW Open Series with their different terrain, right, which is singles. You have the Frontline Tournament Series, the ITC Tournament Series, right? And then you have myriad local communities doing RTTs, smaller GTs, and everything, right?
Yes.
If you look at the UK, you have what they are trying now to do with the UKTC, which is basically the people who started LGT.
Yes.
But also then you have continuous like the Glasshammer, the Hellstorm Wargaming clubs, and you have other clubs that do it a bit differently, right? And then you have also the tournaments which are more towards WTC, right?
Yes.
And all of them are quite different. Do you think that creates more variety in list construction? Because I was listening to a podcast with Vic Vijay and David Gaylord, and they were saying when they are preparing for the LGT and the UKTC, their list changes, right?
Yes. That's also a point. Like a lot of people here ask, "Oh yeah, is it WTC layout?" And it's like, you know that WTC actually also houses own rules, like house rules, basically, which can make a certain difference in list and playstyle. Like people are sometimes not even aware of that, and there's a difference between using WTC layouts and using WTC layouts and WTC house rules. I think it creates a different kind of meta over Europe, but I think in Germany it's coming to a point where everything is very similar. Maybe I'm complaining too high, too much. But
what would you like to see? If, for example, you had an option, what would you like to see more in Germany?
a bit of tune down of terrain, actually. And brighter variants of, let's say, I like what the Baltic Cup is doing because they use actually the the GT ruin area style, you know, with the corridors and stuff like that. I like that because it gives you, in terms of corridors and obscuring areas, it gives you the same circumstances for both deployment zones, but you still have different kind of ruins and slightly different type of ruins. So it affects actually the game on which side you are starting. On one point, playing competitive means we want to measure us as equals, means actually every player should play on the same table in the same deployment zone with the same circumstances. That's the only way you can get the same measure of who's better. But I don't think that should be exceeded to 100%. Like
I kind of
WTC.
disagree with that. For me, competitive is also like, because the terrain and the board is such a third player. For me, I would like to see also if you are good because on the specific terrain, or if you can navigate your army as a general on the different types of setup in war zones, right?
Yeah, and that's what I would
Because
like to. The second, what you just said, yeah.
I would like, for me, for example, I would like to see what I have seen other tournament, like maybe like take different packages and try to say, okay, we will use like 1/3 of the terrains, we will use this setup, 1/3 of the terrains will use this setup, and 1/3 of the terrains will use this setup, for example. So, and
yes,
yeah, I would like to see that because that will create a lot more variation, for example. Like if just to finish, like for example, like if you bring it will also create more balanced lists. Like if you bring a full melee army list and you get in a table where there's more shooting, then you will need to navigate that disadvantage to you, right? So you will have to build up a much more balanced list, actually. So you will bring units that usually don't see play.
Yeah, but there's a very thin margin you can cross to having terrain which is still fair to both sides,
Yes, I agree.
I think I agree on having different terrain. So people cannot just, there are some RTT series in Germany where people know, okay, if I go there with knights, there's a possibility I go 3-0 because I play like on Star Wars Tatooine planet.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't happen,
No.
I think I agree with what you say, but there's still a thin margin and a rather thin line where you can cross to, if you go too far, you have unbalanced
Yeah,
terrain.
I know what you mean. No, I don't want that. But for example, like if it gives a slight edge over a shooting army, one terrain type versus one other terrain type, the slight edge against melee armies.
Yes.
I would like to see that. Like, I'm not talking about like suddenly you are in a shooting gallery. Like suddenly everything is, like the opponent can sit in their deployment zone and shoot. But if you have a shooting army, you have more lanes if you navigate correctly, for example.
Yeah.
So something like that, I would like to see.
Yeah, I agree. Terrain is a third player on this tabletop, especially in this edition. But what I'm just coming back to finish this is in Germany. Still, the very good players do not copy. They may be copy, but they adapt their list to their play style. But if I see the recent list in BCP and stuff like that, a lot of people are just copying lists, and this is actually something from a heart. It annoys me. Like it maybe it comes back from my StarCraft Blue War time, but it really annoyed me when people started copying build orders someone else worked months for. Like it was super annoying. I mean, it's okay if more people are. I like that the tournament scene in Germany to say something positive at least. It's great. Actually, I'm complaining on a very high level, right? So don't misunderstood us. I think the tournament series or the tournament community we have in Germany is great. We have a lot of excellent players. Even the average is above average, I would say. We have great terrain. We have very, 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 very good tournament organizers who are very experienced. We have a lot of players who play the WTCs, and we have a very small community, but the competitive scene is growing rapidly since COVID, also thanks to Tabletop Simulator. I think a lot of people came into the game, and the German competitive scene is very healthy, but on the same time, I think it's driving into, like, compared to the UK or the US or how I knew the North American scene, it's very driving itself to a standard. Maybe it's a German thing to standardize a lot of stuff. And I think what you said is a very good approach of mixing art of terrain to have. I mean, if you want to play the WTC, go to the WTC. But I think what you just say to also have more variances in list building, I would actually welcome a lot if we had more different layouts than just that type X.
I agree with you, and I mean, I want to say, like, living in Hamburg, and for years I was hoping for a more active tournament in Hamburg. The last year and a half development around north of Germany and Hamburg. The tournament with Elb Coast and all the effort they are putting into it is really exceptional, and I respect them a lot for what they are doing. They are putting a really high level tournament play, and if it's an RTT, if it's a GT, they are putting really a high level effort, a high level tournament, and the terrain is really nice to look at. It's not like you don't
And it's
feel like
competitive.
and it's competitive. We are just discussing how to make that more varied, because the trap is that the more tournaments you put, if the layout remains the same, the more stale it becomes the meta, and people will start getting bored because every time they will play in the same style terrain. It's also about, as people, like, for example, play more games, they want to play more armies, they want to play in different type of setups, right?
Yeah.
So in order to keep it fresh and evolving, I think that's what we are discussing, right?
Yeah. The evolution of the meta is very driven by data slates and co, and not by terrain and player skill, I think.
Yes. And I would like to see both.
Yeah, I would like to see a welcome mix of both. But as we said, if you're not from Germany, if you have a longer stay in Germany, take your army. Even the smallest RTT here nowadays, in general, has a very high standard.
I would like also to see more like international tournaments, like the Hanseatic Alliance Open happening in Germany. Yes. I know they are trying to do 2. I'd like to see more, and people coming over from all over Europe to play on these tournaments. I would like to see more of that. I think that will bring also a breath of fresh air. I would like to see more kind of European meta and people from all over Europe coming to Germany to play, like they go to LGT. I would like to see a tournament like the LGT happening in Germany, where people from all over Europe want to come here, for example.
Yes.
That would be really nice.
Yeah. So, as we can say, comparing both metas, I think the German meta is a bit behind. In Germany, it takes a bit longer to evolve, in my opinion, because when the LGT was and Chaos Space Marines were in the top 5, no one here played Chaos Space Marines. Like, we are always 1 or 2 months behind. I don't know if it's about... I don't know. I don't know why it is like that. But
I think it's a hobby lag. I think it's a kind of a hobby lag, and also what kind of armies people own, right? It's also maybe that affects that.
Maybe because we have a smaller community like the UK, for example, and the really good players tend to stay with their of course they stay with their armies, and the variance of players is not that high in Germany, but it's good but not that high, so we more often see the same armies winning stuff and the same people winning the same tournaments. Let's come to the balanced data slate.
Yeah.
Oh, what an embarrassment, man.
I don't agree with that. I'm actually okay with it.
Come on.
I'm actually okay with it. I can give you. I think you should start. I will give you my reasons why I think it's okay.
Yeah. Again, complaining on a very high level, but we're not here to complain. We're here to discuss.
Yeah.
And you are also there to leave comments, and if you know something better or have other input, let us know. What I think, GW said they put a bar for themselves, which is the Meta Watch article. They released this Meta Watch, right, to get an idea of how their armies are doing. So they get a percentage of win ratios and tournaments and stuff like that. So their goal is, and that's a good goal, to keep the armies between 45 and 55% win ratio. In a game with more than 12 factions, it's actually a very solid goal, or a good goal they set themselves. What you have to consider is what kind of tournaments go into the Meta Watch statistics. And I actually don't know too good, because I'm just guessing right now. So they're putting RTTs, they're putting like Nottingham Games Workshop tournament in there. Are they putting also WTC style formats in there? Because it's actually different house rules. So they're possibly not even considering WTC tournaments or other tournaments which
If
have.
you read, because I watched, for me, it was really interesting how they analyze it from, I would say, career perspective. Also, because I work with automation and game theory is also really important
go
for
ahead.
us.
Go ahead.
So they do two things. They also put things from ITC battles where people do normal games like pretzel and beer kind of games. They said they use from all different sources. So and they mentioned specifically also they put casual games also in there. And I can understand why they do that, because they want to balance the game for all players, right? Not only tournament players and the high and min-max.
Tournament players by the end of the day are a very small margin of all the people who play 40K. Yes.
So their goal is to give as broad possible balance as possible. So, for example, they were stating like some people also use like, that's why they said, for example, they're notorious that Space Marine players are so many and so varied skill level that's not very easy to balance it, right? A Space Marine faction to say, okay, make it strong, because a strong player with a Space Marines may win. Like if it's too strong, then they will, but a not strong player will basically. So the variance of the skill level of people, certain armies, plays also a role how they balance, and that was clear from their side.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. For example, like if you think about it, who play Harlequins? Like a normal player will not play Harlequins. They will play usually high-level skill players will play Harlequins and GSC, for example. So they take that. They take that also into account. I'm not saying I agree with that, but it's how they think, and that's the context of the balanced data slate, also, right?
But there's the point. They use it as a type of measurement, which is okay. You have to measure something on some point, and you have to make your different levels on that as well. You know, how much percentage it is casual games, how much is competitive, how much of that is ITC, WTC standard, whatever. It doesn't matter. By the end of the day, they have numbers and they set a goal. So they have AdMech and Space Marines on below 45%. I think Space Marines right now is on 41, 39.
39, I think, and 38, something like that.
What you just said, of course, it's difficult, but Space Marines also have the widest range of miniatures to balance. So what's the point? But when I then see the data slate, I'm really embarrassed because, okay, you want to use the data slate. So the data slate is basically the idea of Games Workshop, you know, to have a balancing tool which they can bring out in every quarter of a year to balance the game in between the GTs or general like continuity and balancing, which is a great idea and the basic core of the idea. It's great. But you have two factions which are almost 30x%, and they need a jump of 5 to 7% to come above these 45%. And for those two factions, you have no better idea in a quarter of a year to change a secondary. And for the other faction, you put, okay, let's go back to the roots at Mac. Here we go again. You should be fine. So what they are doing is they change a lot of stuff, and I'm not even mad because a lot of stuff on the other side is not bad. Don't get me wrong, and some of it, like Silent King, Core Loss, is needed or was needed. But the point which makes me really, really angry is they were 3 weeks late with the slate, and they want to use it to bring the upper factions which are accelerating like above 55%, they want to bring them down, and the factions on the bottom, the two, they want to bring them up. And for the two factions at the bottom, they change nothing. There's a shitload of data sheets in the codex which could have been changed. Space Marines have the worst troop choice in the game by far in terms of points and use. And all they come up with in a quarter of the year to bring the faction up, like they give them a secondary which is only good with Blood Angels, which is the only chapter which is already doing all right. And that's it. They change one secondary and expect Space Marines to do a 6% jump in the meta watch. Are you serious? And for AdMech, it's the same. They put AdMech back to the roots when AdMech were good. Yes, But when AdMech was good, it was on old terrain settings. You had 2 or 4. You could play 4 flyers. You had less terrain. You didn't have so much ruins, and you didn't have armor of contempt. And yes, AdMech was good then. And other armies had not so good secondaries, but AdMech is still shit. So my point is, if that's all that they come up with to bring that 2 armies 6% up to hit the 45% bar, I think Games Workshop doesn't understand their own game.
I think I disagree with that, and I can tell you the reasons, right? For the AdMech, they gave a clear reason why. I think they regretted the first time they nerf AdMech to the ground. So they don't want to nerf armies to the ground, like major changes. And because it invalidates the faction, because suddenly AdMech players, instead of continuing playing AdMech, they stop playing AdMech, right? You had the AdMech representation go also down, right? Which is not good. So you have to see so by reverting the rules to the codex, they give it a chance. And if they want to add extra rules afterwards, they can.
But you and I know, and we are not even experienced AdMech players, we know that is never going to be enough to jump from 38% to 45%. Never.
I think depends. The stratagem, like for example, if they go back to the build with a lot of Vanguard, think about this.
No, Vanguard. I've seen 60 Vanguard doing 2 wounds on 1,000 Terminators.
Not anymore. With when they have again the stratagem that auto wound on 4, and they can have full rerolls.
Yeah, you save it on a 2 anyway, thanks to armor of contempt.
AP2, they are AP2. They can be AP2.
Still, armor of contempt and cover. I don't know,
if you have 40 saves, I think first of all they need to see that. Second, Lucius stacks with cover, so basically you become tough again. So we need to still yeah, and for me it's okay. Like they are clear that they were in the article. They are not sure that this will work, but they don't want to do major changes.
Yeah, but then leave it. Then leave it.
No, I think reverting back to the book and allowing them to play with a full book is good.
But the book was
a positive change. Is it enough? We will see.
But that's my whole point. Like they still have no secondaries to play, and they will still not. They will not make even a 3% jump with that change. And for Space Marines, I think we both play Space Marines, and I think we both can agree that the change to shock tactics will not bring Space Marines to 45%.
No, but Space Marines is a big beast to change, because right now, what will you do? They gave them armor of contempt. It helped them a bit, but give them another extra rule, and it's clear they don't want to change datasheets. They don't want to change actual datasheets and actual weapon profiles and actual datasheets. They don't want to do that.
Because they don't know how to. That's the point.
No, because I think that's a clear choice. Because if you look at Age of Sigmar, in their balanced data slate, they are okay of changing datasheets and giving you new datasheets. But in 40K, the team there doesn't, as a design philosophy, they don't want to be changing datasheets that invalidate books. But the actual datasheet. They don't want you to give you, for example, a new datasheet for intercessors or a new datasheet for aggressors, for example, or whatever. They don't want to give you a new datasheet. In Age of Sigmar, if you look at what they are doing there with, they give you new datasheets also. Like if you look at, for example, they changed the Archon datasheet 3 times. You can say that's better, but people who are more on the casual side, and don't forget our 40K is a much bigger game, they detest that because they don't know what rules they have to follow, right?
And that's the problem, and that's what I mean when I say I think the people working, I mean they worked like 4 months on that sheet, and all they come up with, shock tactics work different, and period. And there's not much more to say about it because.
What would you add if you take that limitation that you don't want to change datasheets in the book? I mean, what would you add?
They could
what would you do?
Secondaries.
They could have changed all the secondaries for them. Do you think that's the problem of Space Marines?
Yes.
That if you give them auto 15 secondaries, okay, they will win.
Is
that a good thing?
No, but the point, it's not about being good or not. The point is bringing Space Marines back to 45%.
But
And
let me ask you
no,
this. Let
the
me ask
thing
you
is,
this. Chaos Space Marines are doing well, right?
but they have good
Do
data
they have?
sheets.
Yeah, but they don't. But they are not. That's what I mean. I prefer for them to, like, I'm okay with Space Marines not doing well for a period of time until they get their new book, and I'm okay with that. And I think as a community, we should be okay with that. That there is a cycle to these things.
There's a cycle, but if you ask me specifically what could have been done to bring Space Marines back, I have a couple of answers to that, actually.
Yeah, what would you do? Yes.
First of all, you don't need to fix all secondaries. Just give them one average, which every chapter can take. So Oath of Moment could be easily back to normal, because it was too good when Space Marines had average data sheets. Bring it back. Then, first of all, change points, because Space Marines right now, in comparison to all other factions, have by far the worst troop slots. Space Marines are an elite army, which are not an elite army, which rely on characters, buff bubbles, and a lot of stratagems and relics. They do not work with the current CP level, because a lot of the armies, okay, you can start with 0 CP, and that even works. My Night Lords have 0 CP or 1 CP with whatever, it works, but it only works if you are not relying on that to make your army good. Space Marines is an elite army which is not elite. It has no secondaries to score, and it has the worst troop choice ever. Even for the worst troop, you spend 95 points for 10 wounds, and that's like, it's doing nothing. You need at least 2 to 3 characters to make Space Marines excel, right? Of course, Blood Angels are different. I can play Black Templars in certain matchups. They are crazy good, but it's not like what you search for competitive plays. You cannot compete with Space Marines right now, with vanilla Space Marines, and that's for Dataslate.
I agree with you, but on the other hand, I'm okay with what they did, because what I don't want to see is a situation, for example, I don't agree with the situation they have done with Necrons, where they gave them really good secondaries. The datasheets are not that good, and basically if they remove the main, also for Necrons, I hear that why didn't they nerf their secondaries, right?
But because Necrons are still below 55.
No,
Sisters
but
are still
also,
better. Harlequins, Tyranids are still better.
But also, if you Necrons right now is, and I will borrow a phrase I heard from another podcast, Necrons are basically a book that is patched together through their secondaries.
Yes, of course. Not only secondaries.
Yeah, but mainly secondaries, because
secondary and one dynasty.
and OPSEC dynasty, yes. Everything OPSEC. That's the only two things keeping that book afloat.
Yeah,
and if they nerf one of those two things, Necrons will go back to oblivion.
Yeah,
and that's the problem I don't want to see with Space Marines. And also, I think it's also tiring to have all these new rules. Like, I'm against the Armor of Contempt rule. I know it helped Space Marines and they helped bump certain factions, but I'm not in favor of that, because we are talking about rules plot in general in 40K, and I think that's the reason for that, and this rules plot is also having extra rules in the data slate.
Yeah, Armor of Contempt is a very lazy attempt to fix something, bro.
But they don't have other options unless they start releasing new data sheets.
The problem with Armor of Contempt is, it helps in certain ways, but it also exceeds way above the intent, I think, especially on Thousand Suns in cover, for example. If you don't have ignore cover and you fight against Thousand Suns with damage 1 weapon, you go from AP 3 or 4 to AP 0 or 1, and that shouldn't be.
And I think, for example, Armor of Contempt validated AdMech more than any of their nerfs, because their weapons were AP 1 and 2 max. So it invalidated a lot of their potential output. And also Gene Stealer cults, the same happened, and a lot of factions were invalidated by Armor of Contempt. And that's why I don't want to see this kind of stopgaps. And to be honest, I'm okay with Space Marines in order to avoid that being at this level. I would agree with you that I would like also moment return to how it was, but I don't think that would have bumped Space Marines up to 45%.
No,
also,
that's not enough. I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
Space Marines need a certain treatment to their character upgrades as well, because if you spend selfless healer and you spend a
Space
load.
Marines need CP in order to operate as a book. In order for it to operate, in order to do well, they need CP.
Yeah, they need the characters so the vanilla units can shine.
Yeah.
And characters in Space Marines are CP heavy. And most Space Marines character are really hardly expensive compared to other factions.
And I can give you my third reason why I'm okay with balanced Dataslate.
Yeah.
My third reason is because we have two major books coming out in November now. Like we have AdMech, we had Leagues of Votann, which are powerful and will change the meta a lot. And we will have also Imperial Guard, which is both a very popular faction and will change the meta also. Like we won't see the same list, right? If suddenly you see tank heavy commanders and everything, suddenly like one damage Zephyrim, which are good against, for example, Marines and elite armies, will not be as good against vehicles like that.
I agree that new releases always bring another form of fixing the game.
And I think they didn't want also to do major changes right now because they don't know where the meta will be, right? Yeah, they don't know. And if you, for example, like you say AdMech don't do a lot of damage, right? Suddenly you bring a lot of guard players back into the fold. Suddenly AdMech with the original book, they will be a good counter for that kind of armies. May not be good against Tyranids, but will be good against guards. So suddenly their win percentage in GTs and tournaments will go up because you will see a lot more guard players. The same will apply with League of Votann, for example.
I agree in all points. But now the but. It's not like I set the bar. They set themselves the bar that the data slate is the key, the tool to bring the armies up to 45 or down to 55%. It's not like I said it. It's like their own bar they set themselves. And
but they never said that will happen the first day after the balanced data slate, right? And they never said that.
They said the data slate is a tool to do that.
Yeah, over a 3-month period.
If they really think shock tactics change it to 45% win ratio for Space Marines, they must be deluded.
No, but I think shock tactics in combination with what kind of armies we will see in the meta.
It's still a bad secondary. It's not.
It's 12 points if you do 3 times. It's better than long war actually. So and still people take long war. So I'm not saying that the secondary will help them. I'm saying that they just added it. Yeah, but I think the shift on the meta you will have suddenly more factions in play than like suddenly you will see maybe other things bump up.
But they took longer.
Yeah.
Than expected, and they come up with that. It's like, for me, it's really embarrassing. I don't know.
First of all, second, I think we as a community also we should stop having always game altering changes in the balance data slate. I think also we overhyped it also as a community.
Yes.
We overhyped it. Like the articles they were saying, oh, things will change, they will nerf Necrons, with no indication that basically we're saying two things, right? On the one hand, we're saying the game is the most balanced ever. On the other hand, we're saying that we expect cataclysmic changes, right? If the game is the most balanced ever, you won't see that many changes in the balance. You will not. That's contradictory by itself, right?
It is. But my big issue with how they try to balance the game is we see a lot of balancing above the factions. I said it in the beginning. The problem I see is, you said it already. I said it with Necrons. You said the example of Sisters. Yes, they balance or try to balance in between the factions, but they are not trying to balance the faction in themselves. So there is very big and huge codices like Necrons have, I think, so much data sheet, characters, units which are not being used because it's not appealing to play them, because compared to pregame move, obsec, and the secondaries, it's so bad to play something else. There's no point. Even if you have some intention of winning, you're not going to play the other. And that's my big issue with they could use the data slate
for all
that. For all
I agree
that.
with you.
Why is
I
it?
Agree.
Okay. Silent King loses core. Okay, we bring down Necrons, like 1% with that, and then we do this to bring Sisters a little bit down. But eventually, you still see the same lists, the same builds. It's all metronome vomit. It never gets there. It's like,
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I agree with you. I think they should do, and I think that you can see. Also, you have to think that they are very careful, right? Because of their whole that they want to cater for everyone. You can see that like one of the innovations in this book, for example, like in this balanced athlete that I have seen, compared to the past, for example, what would they have done with the tyrannic warriors? They would have increased their points, right? They nerf them to the ground as a unit. What did they do here? What is the problem of tyrannic warriors with Leviathan list, right? So remove that wording that gives transhuman to tyrannic warriors, because for the rest, it's okay. No one is complaining about non-Leviathan tyrannic warriors that they are too oppressive, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So, and I think they want to see how this works. And if they see that this philosophy works better for them, then they will start doing more things with that. And you can see that also, like, I think also they tried, for example, limiting the amount for the planes, for example. That was a good thing. But on the other hand, I think they regretted limiting the baggage, because they invalidate a lot of the collections of people, right? And you can see that change in philosophy with the Votan, because they didn't want you to go buy out. And I think people were angry, they nerfed them before the book was out. And I think that was a good thing. And they apologized and they said, and there was a big change there.
But
there is a but the change there was like, I don't want you to invalidate your collection. So we give you the nerfs now so you can plan your collection better.
But still there, I think that's another point which just underlines my previous thought, that they don't understand their game. They write the Votan Codex. I mean, if they had some fine feeling for the game and how it's going to be played competitively or even not competitively, like an FAQ before the real release or with the real release should never happen if they would understand their game properly.
But I heard like what they said. How did they balance Votan? They pitted them in their balance because they don't balance all 24 factions. They don't play test all 24 factions.
You cannot balance 24 factions. It's not possible.
So what they did was playtesting. Like you can see, the book they were playtesting was in the group of books they said. They would balance it against the pre-nerfed Harlequins and Craftworlds, with the pre-nerfed Tyrannids before the book came out, right? And with the pre-nerfed Tau. If you think about it, in those 5 books, it's still not the most broken. Like before all the nerfs, right? It's still not the most broken book.
Yeah.
So when you play test it against those big books that you haven't nerfed yet, that you haven't released yet, and you say, okay, this is balanced within those 5 books, but those 5 books are so much better than the rest of the armies out there, that's where the mistake happened. And it was clear, like, and if you think about it, if you played the Votan book as it came out, with the Tyranid book as it came out, with the Tau book as it came out, would it be broken? No, because it will be the same level with all those books.
It is.
So I think that's a different discussion. I think we should discuss about that when we are discussing about 10th edition, or what we want to see there.
I agree.
How they should approach the game.
I agree,
because that's a design philosophy that they need to take care of.
I think we can summarize on this. I think the data slate did change a lot of necessary stuff, especially to Tyranids. I don't think it's going to heavily cost them in terms of percentage. It was necessary. it was.
I think you will see different type of lists, more interactive lists,
I think
which is good for the game.
I like that. The point when I said I was embarrassed, it was really in terms of AdMech and Space Marines, because I still get your point. I agree on that, but I think if they're really thinking that brings them up to 45%, they're delusional. Just I think that's just not. It's not happening.
I think they were clear that they were clear that they want to see what happens. In the video, at least, Stu Black, which is the creator, he said, "I'm not like he says, I want to see if they go up, and then I will turn another knob."
But if let's be honest, I repeat, but if they think the changes to shock tactics do anything to Space Marines, it's an insult to every Space Marine player, in my opinion. The secondary is good for Blood Angels, which are already doing good. Don't forget that.
I think what they were expecting is, to be honest, what I read between the lines is we are releasing Votan and Death Guard and Imperial Guard, and we want to see how they settle in the meta before we do any major changes. Because those are two big books that are coming out, right?
Yeah,
and one is a major function, right, that people play.
What they, just to add one thing, they could have changed that the upgrade you buy, like for the super apothecary, or if you upgrade to a master sensitivity, he always has Rise Orator inbuilt, not paying for a CP for a Warlord trade. Just a subtle change which could do a lot.
Yeah, or simply for me, what I could have preferred is Warlord Trade relics don't cost money. They don't cost CP. Like, you get the first Warlord Trade and the first relic for free.
Yeah, or that Space Marines in a battalion only need two troop choices. Period.
Yeah, I still believe that they don't. I think that's a bit the discussion, because then you will have to change a lot of list building for a lot of people, and then people will start complaining. Why should I? Then people will start complaining in Chaos Space Marine. Why should I bring three?
But it's the same. It's the same for Imperial. It's the same for Brigade with Astra Militarum, isn't it?
No, it's not. They still need to bring 6 troops. They still need to bring 6 troops. They
and Drukhari get patrols for free. I mean, it's the same shit, different story.
Yeah, but that was always part of their fluff, right? That was part of their design book.
But you could design Space Marines if you want to, if you really want to change.
But that's the thing. They don't want to invalidate whole book sections, and I can understand that, especially for Space Marines.
Anyway, I think the latest balanced data slate is really controversial. I think maybe the listeners can write down what you guys think.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is a lot of opinions about it, and I think that's a good. At least the discussion is good for the community.
It is.
So, should we discuss what do we want to see in January on this?
Yeah, we talked about the German tournament scene. I mean, it's growing fast compared to other countries. The terrain is a lot different. Player plays terrain does basically not happen in Germany. We rarely have team tournaments. I think there are a couple of team tournaments in the planning, but we don't have like established teams like in Poland, for example. We will see where that is going. Player plays terrain, I think it has nothing. I mean, on one point, I can understand tournament organizers which host 250 player tournaments to use player-based terrain, player plays terrain to get that tournament done in some way. But I think on a competitive level, player plays terrain should not happen at all. Because if you have an unexperienced player, your game will even be easier if he has to place his own terrain, because he has no fucking idea what he's doing.
Yeah, I think it's a game onto itself, right? You introduce a mini game within the game.
Yeah, it's unnecessary, and it will just benefit the more experienced player anyway.
For me, I'm okay with player plays terrain as long as you say the middle is 2 big ruins and the rest you can place. So the middle is always set up, because I think the bigger controversy is the middle point usually.
Yes.
I think if you say that the middle is always set up like this, the rest you can place, I'm okay with that. I can live with that.
Do you think we have a European meta?
No, I think we don't. I think if you look at it, we have very regional metas. You have the French meta, which Because of the language barrier also, you don't see so much. You have the Spanish meta, you have the German meta, then you have a small meta in Greece and in Italy, and you have Poland with its own style of meta and its own style of tournaments. Scandinavia is a bit different also.
It's still the same armies dominating, but with a lot different lists, I think.
Yes and no. For example, I would say that you have a homogenization of the army construction because of internet, because of YouTube. People see a lot more tournaments. People see a lot more what's happening out there.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. Unlike you, I'm okay with people copying because it's a way to start. If you are like, I cannot expect everyone to be as creative with their lists. So copying a list and trying to make it work for them is a good starting point.
I'm not sure about that. I would disagree on that.
Yeah, I'm really okay with that. To be honest, you learn a lot if you see other people and how they play and how they build their lists. What I think in Europe we are missing is cross. I would
cross
say
interference between the scenes, right?
Like
exchange.
And I would and if I had a wish list, I would wish, for example, that we had a tournament style series like they have in US, the US Open Series. They created the European Open Series. I would like that.
Yeah.
So that basically you have one in UK, one in France, one in Spain, one in Italy, one in maybe Austria, one in Germany, one in Poland, one in Scandinavia, and then you have a final somewhere. I wish the GW did that also for Europe.
Maybe in 5 years.
I think they are missing. I think the main problem is because they have a main tournament organizer in US who set that up. Yeah. They're missing a personal equivalent like that for Europe.
Yeah, and there's a language barrier here as well, right? So a lot of different circumstances.
It's a language barrier. It's also venue barrier. In US, you have all these big hotels. You can rent whole spaces. Like in Europe, that's much more expensive, right?
Yeah, and the venues are up for stuff like that. In Germany, it's really difficult to get.
Yeah, I mean, look at the tournaments
here. It's really happening. Yeah, here it's really difficult. It gets better, but it's difficult and expensive to get areas for large scale wargaming. You underline wargaming tournaments.
I think it's freer. It's less also, as you say, prejudice in US about that. I would say
it's a different culture, right? And yeah, we have to add that in Germany, up to 2 years ago, tabletop and wargaming was very, very niche and was very looked down at. Controversially, nerd is a very negative word in Germany. Mm-hmm. In the US or in the States or saying North America or UK, nerd is not like a negative word.
No.
Okay, and when I was back in Canada, nerd was not a negative word. Here in Germany, nerd, you imagine like that fat, dirty guy sitting in his basement playing video games, eating chips and chicken all the day, and having a dirty shirt and painting miniatures or stuff like that. But it's not like that. So I think wargaming reaches a level where it's socially more acknowledged right now. It gets more and more, my boyfriend does it too, and stuff like that. It's not like that niche anymore like it was 3 years ago. But it needs time.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, they had the European Warhammer Fest also, right? In Germany. Yes. That hasn't happened again. I don't know. I think it has to do also that with the WTC politics, and most European countries are involved with WTC, and tournament organizers in these countries are working with the WTC, which GW notoriously don't like. I think that affects it a bit. But I would like to see some more of a unified meta in Europe, like more of a European, because what I find strange is the distances are much smaller in Europe compared to US, right?
Like, I mean, I drove to Alberta from Vancouver, which is like, I don't remember, 6 hours or so. I could drive to London in 6 hours. Or Denmark. Or France. But I don't do it.
Yeah. And that's I find a bit weird, right? That although the distances are much smaller, the hobby distance and the people distance is much bigger, right?
Yeah. Also, I remember back in Canada, we had like gaming centers in downtown because the apartments in downtown were super expensive, and you barely had place for you didn't have a hobby room there in your apartment in downtown because rent was so super expensive. So you had these gaming areas, and people would pay $10 to $15 a month, and there were like 10 tables, and it was always someone there to play with. It's like a different. It's more like an in I think in other countries, also in Spain, it's more like an open-minded community. In Germany, it's very closed in itself. It opens a bit, but in Germany we say like everyone is baking their own bread. If that makes sense.
I know what you mean.
It's like
yeah. I don't know. I think that is something I think we need to see how it evolves over the next years. I think it is to the GW's interest to expand in Europe because it's a big market for them, and it could really bring them more. Also, I would like to see, for example, a world final, singles final in Nottingham, for example, in that basically that you have this US series, you have the EU Open series, and maybe they have an Australian series and New Zealand series, for example, and then the winners of all those series, like the top players of all these series, go for a world final. I would like to see something like that, for example. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And I think we're missing that right now. I think you have it with the WTC, but also the WTC, for example, this year was not streamed, right? I found that really weird.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, man. I mean, we had not like one major topic in this podcast, but it was our first podcast to get a little bit into the feeling of it, to introduce ourselves. So, want to close this one?
Yes.
So basically, what comes next? I mean, it's been a year so far. A lot of releases. We just today we had the Christmas boxes released. We have a new GT awaiting in January or end of December. Whoever knows. Actually,
I
you
think
want to
it's
leave?
January, and if I have to guess, I think that comes after the LVO. Or like it's two things because the LVO is such a big tournament. Either will come beginning of January to catch the LVO, so that the LVO starts with a new GT, or it will come after the LVO. I think one of the two will happen because LVO is such a big tournament. They don't want to release it while the LVO is about to happen.
Yeah, I have two things. First of all, today the Battle Forces has been exposed for this year.
Yeah,
quite a disappointment. But did you take notice, if you look at it, that the Space Marine boxes look a lot different?
They look like a limited edition box set.
They look like, hey, every chapter gets their own codex.
Kind of
that's what they look like.
I think that's where you see the change when they decide to change, because that I think was like, I think they have these boxes and the artwork and everything as a limited edition, but I have the suspicion that shows also the effect of COVID. They decided to not release the new supplements. I think that shows that they decided not to release the new supplements.
Maybe. I think in the next few days we'll get more insight on why the Space Marines boxes look so different. And
I don't think they will say anything about it, because that will make Space Marines fan even angrier. And I think they want to avoid that. So I think they will just leave it for people to speculate. And I think because if they say that we want to release supplements, but because of the schedule we decide not to, people will get angry.
Is that a firstborn bolter on a primary Space Marine on the Imperial Fist box?
No, I don't think so.
No. Another thing, new GT comes. That's the last thing I want to drop, and it's not to rant here. I'm just to open discussions and drop my thoughts. So don't take my thoughts for a rant. It's just to point some facts or thoughts. First of all, I like the idea of data slates. I said that earlier. I like the idea of current and continuous balancing of a game. If done right, it can be really beneficial for everyone. But I'm a bit afraid, to be honest. I think 2 GTs with new missions, new secondaries, and new point costs every 6 months are too much. Do you agree?
Yes and no. Think about if I think back to the first of the ninth, the beginning of the ninth edition, where we had 1 GT per year before they start going to the 6-month season. After 6-7 months, people engagement went down because the missions were the same, the secondaries were the same, and I think that went down. I'm in the opinion that the 6-month season, I agree with you, is too much, but I think we will need to change the whole setup of how they do the tournament packs.
Yeah.
And this I would, for example, would prefer that we had 12 to 15 missions in the book, so that you had more variety on the missions you can play. And I think that will, and also like tournaments could shuffle through the missions. You know what I mean? If you have 9 missions, usually 1 or 2 are not that good, you end up playing the same missions again and again.
My really big issue with that is they try, and I was really I come back to StarCraft because Blizzard took 6 years until StarCraft Brood War was, I would say, the most balanced real-time strategy game up until today, and it has only 3 factions, and they took 6 years to bring it to a level where each faction was at almost 48 to 52%, almost at 50% every faction. That's crazy good. I'm afraid because the only measure we have over all the factions is the missions we play, right?
Yeah.
So we need one baseline to put the measuring from, and that should be, or that the only baseline we can measure on is how each faction performs against each other, and performance is cut in victory points, and victory points are achieved by missions in a regard of terrain, of course, and layout and stuff like that, and player skill. But the baseline for everything is a mission being played. If it's a hold 2 for more, if it's a hold 1 for 4, if it's sticky markers, if it's 6 markers, if it's 5 markers, it's beneficial for some factions to have a midfield mark on the no man's land, right? If you play Oath or the old Stranglehold.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the baseline of all measurements are the missions, and if you change them, like let's see, you release new missions in January. You take numbers, you take results up to March, 2 months of GTs playing with it, and then you get numbers you can work with. It's not like before April you won't have actually numbers which are basically, especially because you have new releases as well, you cannot take numbers for granted until 3 or 4 months into it. And then you already start changing the baseline again. So I'm afraid that the whole continuity in fixing this game is basically like wetting your eyes and drying them out again, because it's always on the run. It's never on the long side. It's always just, okay, we fix it for the next 2 months, and then it's gone again, and we start new, and then we start new, and then we start new. It's like a never-ending rope of just stop it. I mean, I know Games Workshop will never do that, but 9th edition, for example, you know what I'm going to say, right? Is 9th edition in terms of game mechanics is okay. It's nice. Just stop it here. Reduce it a bit, slim it down, the stratagems, bring in some reactions maybe, put 9.5 edition, whatever. But we are always on a continuity of FAQs releases new maps, and then we change the baseline again every 6 months, and we start anew again to take new numbers, new measurements. And in terms of, it's like, imagine you try to program a software and you try to make it work on Windows and Linux again, and you always change the hardware again. Every time you almost achieve to balance it, that it works stable on both systems, you always change the hardware and the baseline of both. That's my point. Like, if you,
I'm in favor of that. I agree also that for me like I'm okay with the seasons, but I think the missions should be the same. So the seasons should be more like based on the data slate rather than on the mission pack. And I think also they should, for example, that's why I'm comparing with Age of Sigmar, right? Because that's the other in-house game of GW. So I would like to see them do more major changes one time. They have the season for a year, but then, like in the balance data slate, for example, they start playing with composition. Like, for example, say that this, for example, if you look at the Age of Sigmar, they name, okay, this we are playing the veteran pack, right? Suddenly, elite slot, for example, or this kind of units are better against this kind of units in this specific setup because we are playing this war zone, right? The mission didn't change so much, but it changes the composition of the armies, right? It makes you have to have different decisions. So if I had to suggest something to GW about that, would be release a mission pack for a season, let's say from January to January. Let's say you start with after the LVO and you finish after the LVO, so the LVO is the end of the season. Like if you want to name it, like do something like that, or the GW finals is the end of season, for example, that could be also an option. And then you have for the whole pack, and then you have a major balance data slate and then a minor balance data slate that the minor balance data slate does this kind of thing that, for example, something happened, like a fluff reason, like because we are playing this Warzone whatever, let's say Warzone Armageddon like everyone likes, because over the 6 months this happened, like suddenly no more aircrafts can be allowed because there is a lot of fleets in the sky and they bombed the aircrafts, they killed all the aircrafts, right? Suddenly you have only ground troops you can bring, for example, right? No more aircrafts. For example, like, or you can only for this 6 months you can only take 2 of each instead because the resources are lower, right? So you have 2 units of each type, not 3. And I would like to see, or you, for example, instead of having on this, you have to take patrols or you have to take battalions, for example, and then you change the army composition. And I think that's something that they do well by introducing this kind of things in Age of Sigmar packs. They feel refreshed, although the missions are more or less similar. Like the layouts don't change much, the battle tactics didn't change much, but because they introduced this kind of, these are veteran units, and then you have these bounty hunters who hunt veteran units, right? So it became a tug of war. Do you bring bounty hunters? Do you bring veterans? And so on. So I would like to see something like that. Bring into 40K from Age of Sigmar design philosophy. And as you say, I would like to see the mission pack grow a bit. The initial mission pack, I would like to see it grow a bit, like you have 12, 15 maps instead of 6 to 9, and that you can use for a year. Basically, instead of having 2 packs, just incorporate everything in a big pack for a year, basically.
Yeah, and rotate.
Yeah.
My big issue is, if I look at other games and other systems like Bolt Action, Age of Sigmar, they tend to need a lot less treatment in order to be fun and be competitive also at tournaments, because 40K is one of the most unstable games out there. It might has to do with that amount of rules, that amount of factions, and you cannot balance it. So it's an illusion we run behind, in my opinion, because you cannot balance this game to a point where everything is equal. It's not going to happen, never. That's too much factors, too much variables. But what my point is, I play right now not, but I tend to play 1 to 3 games in 1 week. And for me, it's kind of delusional to right now. Right now we have November, and I know, okay, I'm going to stream one tournament. You're going to play one tournament. There might be one other tournament I go to as a player, if indeed. And I'm now lazy to build new list, to buy new stuff, because I don't know what can happen. Games Workshop can come up with every stupid idea possible, and you never know what's going to happen in January. And it can be that all your purchases go down the toilet, or all your list ideas are basically useless. So it's like I can't even start working on a serious concept on my own, and it will just, and I'm a much player, like a player who plays a lot, and imagine like the average guy.
It feels rushed.
The world, the 40K world turns too fast right now.
I agree. And to that regard, that's why I say I would prefer to see one big chapter approved tournament pack for a whole year. Like this is a tournament pack for 2022. And with the balanced data slate, they kind of, for example, say, okay, for the first half, you're allowed to use these things. And the second half, for example, they come out and say, oh, something happened in a fluff reason. Also will make it connected with narrative. And I think that's also important for 40K, that you create this kind of narrative stories around the, like, based on the win rates and everything, you can create a narrative story, right? You don't need to, like, for example, if Eldar are doing well, because Eldar are winning so well, this happened. So from the next 6 months, you can not use this, or this happened and that happened, right?
Yeah.
So that could be actually something that I hope they look into it, because I think no one likes to play a game that is very outside of the narrative and outside of the fluff.
My point is, even I have a lot of armies, and I play a lot, and I come behind, and it really costs you even more effort than ever to stay tuned. And if you have not I know people who need half a year to build a 2,000 point army and paint it, and it's outdated by the day you can paint it. And I think it's not good. It's too much, too fast. It has positive things, but I think it's really delusional, and in my opinion, I don't even care anymore. I say, okay, next season I'm just gonna play World Eaters and Black Templars, no matter if they're good or not. Just focus on one faction, and that's it. There's no point to chase meta nowadays with that release frequency we have with several armies.
I agree. And for that's why also I'm thinking like we'll have 1 or 2 armies max that I play per season, and that's it. I also think that having so many rushed, it actually reduces the tournament going people at the end, because it reduces accessibility, and when you reduce accessibility, it will make the tournament scene dry out at the end, because people will get tired, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to end with, right?
Yeah, I think so also.
Yeah, it leaves me in deep thought, actually. Yeah, because for my example, I don't care anymore. I go with Black Templars, World Eaters. I don't care, because it makes you tired, and the hobby shouldn't be tiring.
Yeah.
And in order to be competitive at a very high level, you have to excel and play a lot in one list. And if there is so much changes, and I think there shouldn't be a codex release and 6 months later you should have a new edition and your codex is garbage. That should not happen to any game. And that's what sadly happens to GW's 40K. But we are still here and play the game because we love it. So who are we to complain?
Exactly.
But it's still a matter of fact, and I think it's healthy to discuss about those things. And I hope, or we hope, you liked our very first podcast. And the next podcast, this was a little bit of in between everything. In the next upcoming podcast, we will have specific topics we will talk about, and we will have a lot more focus. But right now, we want to take a nice introduction. And have a nice range of topics. And I think we covered what what we had in mind, right? It's a lot of
Yes, I
things we
think.
think about.
Yeah, I think it's both topics we touched today are quite big, and the discussion is endless around those topics.
Yeah, I think we just scratched the surface, but
Yeah,
our listeners can put anything else to it in the comments. In any case, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the time codes in the description below. We are also happy if you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. And of course, we will make this podcast accessible for you on Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, and so on. So, yeah, Christos, that's it for now, right?
yeah. Thank you
That
everyone for listening.
Yeah, that was Sanguis Extremis, your podcast for competitive 40K content. See you later, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye.